Nevada in the 1970s promised endless possibility. Union casino jobs could buy you a ranch home for $30,000, while summer heat regularly cracked 110 degrees. For most, the Strip wasn't fantasy. It was the morning grind, the paycheck, the first backyard pool. But beneath the neon, daily life held subtler stakes. How did ordinary families transform this desert into a place to build a future? For thousands of workers in Las Vegas, the day started long before the neon signs flickered on. Dealers stepped onto the casino floor in pressed shirts, sliding into their stations with the shuffle of cards and the soft clatter of chips. In the kitchens behind the scenes, cooks tied their aprons and fired up grills, prepping for the breakfast rush that would fill the dining rooms with the scent of bacon and coffee. Shift work defined the rhythm. Some clocked in before dawn, others just as the city's lights began to fade. Union cards sat tucked in wallets, a quiet assurance that paychecks would come on time. The Culinary Workers Union Local 226 negotiated steady wages and health benefits, turning what might have been temporary jobs into reliable careers. For most, the base pay alone did not stretch far, but pooled tips made the difference. Dealers at blackjack and craps tables counted out their share at the end of each shift, the day's luck measured not in jackpots but in stacks of small bills. Waitresses balancing trays through the den could walk away with more than $50 in tips after a good night, sometimes enough to cover a week's groceries. Break rooms filled with laughter and union talk. Scheduled breaks were protected, a point of pride and sometimes contention. Every so often the routine broke. In March 1976, 27,000 workers, including dealers, cooks, bartenders, and housekeepers, walked out for 16 days, shutting down a third of the Strip's hotel rooms. The city quieted, casino floors went dark, and families waited, paychecks on hold. The strike ended with an hourly raise of $1.35 and better benefits, a hard-won victory that rippled through pay stubs for years. Most days, though, were ordinary. The end of a shift meant tired feet and cash in hand. Workers headed home with the hum of slot machines still in their ears, knowing tomorrow would bring the same steady march. Clock in, hustle, count tips, clock out. For many, this was the foundation, a routine that made buying a house, raising a family, and building a future in the desert possible. A handful of cash from a night's work could open the door to something new, a house with a patch of grass, a driveway, and the promise of privacy. In the early 1970s, tract homes in the Las Vegas Valley were listed for $25,000 to $40,000, prices that drew families west from Bakersfield and east from Chicago, all chasing the same dream of a backyard under the desert sun. Real estate ads promised affordable luxury and a pool for the kids, while developers carved out entire neighborhoods seemingly overnight. For one couple newly arrived from the Midwest, the move felt almost unreal. They drove past cinder-block walls and half-finished streets, their car loaded with boxes and a battered fan. The realtor handed over keys to a 3-bedroom ranch with an evaporative cooler humming on the roof. That first summer, the cooler rattled day and night, pushing dry air through every room. It was not air conditioning exactly, but it made 110-degree days bearable. Evenings settled into a pattern. Neighbors drifted outside to grill burgers or chat over chain-link fences. Children splashed in above-ground pools, their laughter carrying across rows of nearly identical houses. The sound of water running in backyard hoses, the slap of screen doors, and the distant hum of the Strip at night all became part of the routine. Growth moved quickly, sometimes faster than the city could keep up. New schools opened with crowded classrooms. Some streets ended in stretches of dirt waiting for pavement. Water rationing notices arrived in the mail, and city council meetings filled with talk of zoning and infrastructure. But there was a sense that problems could be solved, or at least managed. For many, these neighborhoods offered their first real taste of stability. Casino paychecks and tip money went toward mortgage payments, a new refrigerator, maybe even a backyard pool. The desert felt less like an obstacle and more like a blank canvas. In these homes, possibility hung in the warm air, as tangible as the scent of charcoal and the low whir of an evaporative cooler on a summer night. Beyond the suburban sprawl, the rhythm of life changed with the land. In northern Nevada, ranchers rose before sunrise, pulling on boots still dusted from the day before. Cattle grazed under endless skies, and the work, fencing, branding, haying, stretched across miles of open range. The land demanded patience and grit. Winters brought biting wind, summers brought weeks without rain. Yet for families who had run cattle here for generations, each season was a measure of pride and survival. Not far from the ranches, the mines shaped another kind of routine. By the mid-1970s, the Carlin gold boom drew new faces to Elko County. Miners rode to their shifts in battered pickups, descending into shafts where the air was thick with dust and the promise of a steady paycheck. Gold had replaced copper as the lifeblood of the region, and with it came the hope that a good run underground could last a lifetime, or at least long enough to raise a family. In the heart of Elko, Basque boarding houses stood as quiet anchors. At dusk, long tables filled with lamb stew, beans, and red wine. Ranch hands and miners, some new arrivals, some with decades behind them, shared stories in a mix of English, Spanish, and Euskara. The handball court echoed with laughter and rivalry. Even as mechanization trimmed the number of boarders, the ritual of communal dinners endured, a tradition carried from the Pyrenees to the high desert. Life here moved at its own pace, shaped by the land and the bonds of work and heritage. July afternoons on the open road could feel endless. A small-town driver headed out on US 95, eyes squinting against the glare, with the temperature already pushing past 110 degrees. The car's dashboard radiated heat, and the air inside thickened despite the vents blowing full blast. Every mile brought the risk of a radiator boiling over or a tire giving out on the shimmering asphalt. In the 1970s, these breakdowns weren't rare. They were routine, logged by the highway patrol in notebooks that read like a heatwave diary. Dust storms would sweep across the valley, turning the horizon into a blur and swallowing up the road in seconds. Pulling over meant waiting in the silence, engine ticking, as the wind rattled the car doors. Towns could be 50 miles apart, and running out of water was more than an inconvenience. Drivers carried jugs in the trunk, just in case. For families living outside the city, every errand or school run meant checking the gas gauge and listening for trouble under the hood. The desert didn't bend to anyone's schedule. It set its own pace, and life moved with it, measured by the hum of engines, the sting of sunburn, and the long, quiet stretches between one patch of civilization and the next. Evenings in Nevada offered a kind of escape that felt both ordinary and extraordinary. Just off the casino floors, showroom doors opened to the sounds of orchestras tuning up and the low murmur of anticipation. Inside, velvet curtains framed stages where headline acts performed almost every night. Elvis at the MGM Grand, Tom Jones at the Flamingo, and a steady parade of singers and comedians making their way through the lounge circuit. For locals, tickets could be had for a fraction of what tourists paid. It was not unusual to see a neighbor in the next seat, sipping a drink and settling in for the show. Backstage, a lounge singer slipped into a sequined dress, checked her lipstick, and waited for her cue. She would finish her set, then head home to a quiet apartment, her costume slung over one arm. For many performers and stagehands, this was steady work, sometimes glamorous, often routine. Showroom waiters and cocktail servers moved through the crowd, balancing trays and catching glimpses of world-famous acts between orders. In Reno, the nightlife carried its own rhythm. There were smaller rooms, softer lights, and a real sense that anyone might step up to the mic. Entertainment was woven into the fabric of daily life, close enough to touch but never quite the center of it. Most people still worked regular jobs, but for a few hours the stage lights made the desert feel wide open. full of possibility. Nevada's 1970s spirit, rooted in blue-collar grit and open horizons, still shapes its identity. As the state welcomes new waves of residents each year, the balance between reinvention and resilience endures. Ordinary lives built this place. That possibility remains, shimmering beyond the neon. Thank you for watching.